Hello British literature students, and welcome to this video that is designed to help you do better on your research paper. So if you will, if you haven't done so already, you may want to pause the video, although since you're watching the video you've probably already done it. But pause the video and do a couple of things. One is go ahead and print up these instructions. I'm going to go through these instructions during the course of this video and try to explain a little bit better what certain parts of these instructions mean. And then I want you to take a look at the rest of the folder and explore all of the tools that I have in there to help you, such as the stuff that'll help you with your annotated bibliography, such as the handouts and the link to the library's research page, and all kinds of other good resources that will help you do the correct kind of research and do well on this research paper. So I'm going to pause here for a minute while you pause the video and maybe explore. You may, if you don't have a printer, you don't necessarily need to print this, but I would at least open it up and minimize it in your window so you can pull it up and down as you need to. Alright, I'm back. Okay, so let's just jump right into it because I don't want to spend too much of your time on this video. I just want there to be enough time to help you out. And we're going to start with the timeline. So this coming Friday, June the 19th, your annotated bibliography is due in the D2L Dropbox by 11:59 p.m. And by the time you're watching this video, the Dropbox should be set up for you in the research paper folder. So it's in the research paper folder, should be near the top. I haven't exactly decided where I'm going to place it yet, but it will actually say on it, annotated bibliography Dropbox. I mean, it can't be any easier than that. So that'll be the 19th. Then on Friday, July the 3rd. Now, I understand that this is actually 4th of July weekend, but I'm giving you 2 weeks from the 19th to the 3rd. So if you want your 4th of July weekend off, you probably should have this done by July the 1st or July the 2nd, however long it takes. You should have a first draft of the research paper. Now, we're going to go through this, and you're going to find that if you did well on your first essay, you've already done a lot of the research paper. Now you're just taking the research that you're doing, and you may need to just add a couple of quotes, or you could need to add paragraphs. In fact, you probably will need to add paragraphs, because while the original essays were only about 2 to 3 pages, this research paper will be 4 to 6 pages, and that does not include your works cited page. So go ahead and take a time to add your research and add it well to strengthen your argument. Now, when you do your research, you may find that you need to change your argument, and that's perfectly fine. That could mean having to write a whole new paper. But or if you did poorly on that first paper, you may need to write a whole new paper. But you've got 2 weeks from the time the annotated bibliography is due, which means that your research should more or less be done and getting that first draft in. Now, I do want to stress this point. Just because you turn the annotated bibliography in on Friday does not necessarily mean that your research is done. You may find that you need to do more. You may find that there's something on your annotated bibliography that is not useful. So you'll take it out and you'll replace it with something. As long as you've got a minimum of 3 sources that either come from a good academic publisher in a book form or that come off of Galileo, then you will be in good shape. Even if it means that all 3 of your sources in your final paper do not appear at all in your annotated bibliography, and all the annotated bibliography stuff was scrapped. So you're getting your research started, and we're going to take a minute to talk about that. Actually, let's talk about that now. There is a link to the library's research page in our research paper folder. Carol Nemajovsky, who is the librarian here at Darton, has put together this page with a ton of links to videos and handouts and everything imaginable for doing true research. Take the time to go into that page if you are worried about this assignment and do the links that are in there. Watch those videos. Read those handouts. Do whatever you have to do in order to understand how to do good research. And I guess I'll go ahead and talk about this now also. Anybody can use Google. Some of you probably were using Google at 7 or 8 years old. It doesn't take a genius to go into a web browser, go to Google, type in a search term, and get a whole bunch of hits, maybe 100,000 hits on your term. That's easy. What we're trying to teach you how to do here is what's called credible research. And we're going to talk about credible research in a little bit. But you're going to be doing research written by people that are true experts in English literature. People like Harold Bloom, among others. People who actually make a living at teaching British literature. People like me. And that work will be reviewed by other peers. We're going to talk about peer reviewed in a minute. That is who you're going to be quoting in your paper. You will not be quoting Wikipedia. You will not be quoting SparkNotes. You certainly will not be going to a website. In fact, it's actually written down here on this page 1 under the sources that you're forbidden from quoting. In fact, I'll read that list to you. Wikipedia, do not quote it. SparkNotes, Book Rags, Pink Monkey. I don't know if Pink Monkey still exists, but for a while it was something like a SparkNotes. Google or Yahoo Notes. There is Google Scholar. I'm aware of Google Scholar. However, a lot of what you'll find in Google Scholar might be dissertations or master's theses that were written by students like me. You can find my work on Google Scholar. My work was reviewed by other peers and it was signed off on. It's not work I'm truly proud of. In fact, I wrote my master's thesis on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I am currently writing my dissertation on hard times. So these are works that I'm very familiar with because I have studied them for so long. But the stuff you're going to be getting off of Galileo is actually better quality than Google Scholar. As good as Google Scholar is. Google Scholar, there's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of good stuff. But Galileo is even better than that. Amateur blogs. Please don't quote something from somebody that's sitting in his mom's basement munching down Cheetos and playing Xbox and says, hey, I think I'll add something to a blog about Pride and Prejudice. And it's basically some random thought that he threw on there. Don't quote sites like that. You want to use experts, not somebody living in his mom's basement. And especially this one. Any website that sells essays to students who are trying to get out of writing their essays. Even if you cite 123helpme.com, or even if you cite easyessays.com, or my favorite, echeat.com. Even if you cite one of those sources properly, you will fail because I will assume that you went in there and bought a paper and tried to plagiarize off of it. So these are all sites that you cannot cite from. You can only cite sources that you got off Galileo and Gill. And that's on page 2 here. So we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So you will have Friday, July the 3rd, which is about 2 weeks after you've turned in your anti-bibliography, to apply your research to your paper, to make whatever adjustments are necessary. A lot of your comments when I get around to grading these essays, which should be soon, these comments will be geared towards what I think might help you in the research paper. So bear that in mind as well. During the week of July the 6th, because I won't start reading these until July the 6th, look for my comments on your first draft as I give you helpful advice on how to make your paper better. I will give you a lot of comments on this. Those of you that have taken me for courses before, and there are some of you out there, you know that I give a lot of comments saying, change this, change that, but I'll also tell you what's working. Hey, this thesis statement is great. Stick to your thesis. Or I'll say something like, man, that paragraph that you had, the third paragraph of page 4, that paragraph's right on. You don't need to change a thing. So I'll tell you that as well. So you will get plenty of comments on me, and it may take me the entire week. Even though I only have 16 of you in this class, I want to do as good a job giving everybody thorough comments as possible. So the first student may get their comments on the 6th. The 16th student may not get their comments until that following Friday. But that's okay. And you know why? Because you will have until the 28th, which is a Tuesday, to get your final draft into the Dropbox. Now notice this note down here. The Dropbox for the research paper will shut off at 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday night, July the 28th. Under no circumstances will I accept late papers through email or hard copy. If you write me up and you say something like, oh, my internet was cut off because I didn't pay my bill, I'm going to say, boo-hoo, that's too bad. And I still will not accept your paper. And here's why I have to do that. The 28th is your due date. by the 30th, I think it is, or maybe the 31st at the latest, I have to have your grades to the registrar. So if you send me something on the 31st, I may have already submitted the grades to the registrar. And I may be headed to Florida to enjoy the beach. So don't be late. Make sure, and remember, this is worth 24%, I think it is. Yes, 24% of your overall grade. That's a quarter of your grade. So you don't want to miss this. So be on time. I am giving you a you are going to spend more than a month on this one assignment. That will give you chances to write drafts. That will give you chances to send me drafts if you want. You're required to send one draft, which will be by July the 3rd. By the way, in case you're asking, I'm probably still going to get a couple of emails on this. You will submit your first draft in the same Dropbox that you submit your final draft in. So the Dropbox will say due on July the 28th, but your first draft is due in that very same Dropbox on July the 3rd. So essentially you're submitting two papers to the same Dropbox. So I hope that that's clear enough for you. All right. So that is the schedule. And if you have any questions, email me or call me up. By the way, I did send you an email this morning saying that I am now aware that I got the numbers backwards in my phone number. So the phone number has been, new syllabi have been uploaded with the correct phone number, and the email has the correct phone number. And if you have a print copy, you can just take a pen and say, okay, scratch, and then put the right number in there. So now you should be able to reach me a lot more easily. All right. Let me repeat. You're simply expanding on your first essay by bringing in experts to help you sustain your claims. Now, when you bring in experts, you may have to do a lot more rewriting, but you're not starting an essay from scratch. And you are writing your essay about whatever your work is, whether it's Pride and Prejudice, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, or The Importance of Being Earnest. I did not receive any first essays on hard times, unfortunately, but which is a shame because there's a lot of good research on that as well. But you will only be expanding upon your first essay, not writing any essay from scratch. Okay. So, also look at the note here. By literary scholars, I mean individuals who have published in peer-reviewed academic journals. All right, here's what a peer-reviewed journal is. If I write an article and I want to publish it in a good peer-reviewed journal, I will write an article and I will send it in to that journal's editor. That editor will then send that article out to usually about 3 other experts, sometimes 2, but usually about 3 other experts in the field. So let's say I write my dissertation on hard times, and then I decide that I'm going to want to publish an article out of that dissertation. I will send it probably to something like Victorian Studies or Victorian Newsletter or one of those. The editor will then send that article to 3 other people that he or she knows is an expert on Charles Dickens. And particularly, if he or she can find an expert on hard times, send the articles to those people. If those 3 peers say, yes, this article is great, then the newsletter will publish it. If, for whatever reason, those experts say, no, this is absolute garbage, you shouldn't be printing this, then it will get rejected. So when you read something out of these peer-reviewed journals, and there is information on the page that Ms. Nemajovsky has, when you have information from peer-reviewed journals, you know that it's good information because other experts have given it the thumbs up. And I think I've got it here somewhere else. But make sure you check that peer review button. When you go into Galileo, it's not necessary in Gill because in Gill you should get academic books. But when you go into Galileo, you should check that peer review button and make sure that it is checked. And also make sure you check the full text button. That way you can read the article. Because there's nothing worse than seeing an abstract and thinking, this is it, this is the perfect article, and then not being able to read it because the full text is not attached. So make a note of this. Maybe at the top of this page, make a note. Check these 2 boxes in Galileo. Full text and peer reviewed. Once you check both of those boxes, you should be good to go. And you should get nothing but good, reliable sources to help you with your paper. All right, I think that covers everything on page 1. All right, page 2. So what sources can you use? Anything that can be found in Galileo or Gill, I've already said that. There's your summer Galileo password. I put it here on page 2 And again, on page, well, whatever the last page is, at the very bottom of the last page, there's the password again. The password, by the way, is, well, I don't know if you can see it on here, but right there at the very bottom, that little blurb at the bottom, is also the password. The password is CAUSE, C-A-U-S-E, all lowercase letters. If you send me an email, Mr. Smith, I don't know what the password to Galileo is. Can you please give it to me? I will not say CAUSE. It would take me a second to write C-A-U-S-E and send it to you. Instead, I will send you an email back saying, read the instructions for the research paper. Because I've got it in 2 places in here. If you send me that email, what that tells me is you didn't take the time to read this, and you likely have not heard me say what I just said, because you likely haven't watched this video either. So, don't be that student that gets an email saying, why don't you check the instructions? Instead, check the instructions, find CAUSE in there, and use that. So, that's my little rant about that. All right. The assignment itself. Look at the comments that I've given you on your first essay. Again, most of those comments are going to be designed to help you on this project. Go to the Darton Library homepage and use either Guild to find books that are in our library. There's also an interlibrary loan feature, which you're not required to use, but it's a good feature. And if you're interested in interlibrary loan, then go ahead and contact me. Or if you think you're struggling with finding stuff in our library on Galileo, let me know, and my next suggestion will be to use interlibrary loan. And I'll do that on a case-by-case basis per student, because not every student is going to need to know how to use library loan for this assignment. But it's a great resource, and I think it's one that can help you if you're struggling with finding information. So using Guild or Galileo for journal articles, find a minimum of 3. There it is right there. I even put it in bold text. 3 outside sources that will either verify or dispute the thesis which you've developed in your essay. Then you're going to incorporate that research into your already existing essay. Notice that it says already existing essay. Incorporate that research into your already existing essay to make it into a research paper. Refer to the research paper slideshow in D2L. You can also refer to both the Purdue OWL, or you can refer to your My Blank English book that you should have gotten for English 1102. You should still have that book. That book can be a great resource in helping you write this research paper. In fact, there's a whole chapter on how to write literary research papers. So all of that can be helpful to you in writing this paper. All right, just a reminder of what this a good essay consists of. You should have a nice introduction that leads into your thesis statement. Don't make the thesis statement your first sentence. Have me an introductory paragraph and lead up into that. There's multiple ways you can do this. You can either tell a little story, or you can that actually refers back to the book, or you could do a compare and contrast. You could have quotes. You could do whatever. However you have to lead up. There are many ways to lead up to the thesis statement. Have your thesis statement ideally about the last sentence of the first paragraph. Sometimes you may do it in the last sentence of the second paragraph. But it should be clear to me what your thesis statement is. That thesis statement should be clear and precise and will alert the reader to what the essay is going to be about. Some of your comments on these first essays may be, I can't find a thesis statement. What that means is, after reading your introduction, I still don't have a clue what your essay is going to be about. If you have a good solid thesis statement, I have a clue what the essay is going to be about. A good topic sentence in each paragraph, and that's usually the first sentence of each paragraph. That's where I'm going to be looking for the main points. When we go through the rubric, you'll see that main points is part of the rubric. Usually I'll look for that at the very beginning of each paragraph. If you have good solid points, then the next part is enough development in each paragraph to fully support the main point, aka topic sentence. The quotes are development. Explanations of how something works is development. Showing connections is development. These are all ways to develop an essay that help make your thesis that much stronger. And then you should have a conclusion. It should not feel like you ended this essay in the middle of the essay. There should be a nice little conclusion to wrap everything up nicely and to bring a sense of completion on the part of the reader for having taken the time to read your essay. So make sure that you have a good solid conclusion as well. Now, take a look at the bottom of page 2 here. Look at that in bold letters and all caps. What I expect from this essay. What I expect from this essay. And notice how much of this is in bold, because I can't stress these points enough. One, I expect that your research will supplement your argument and will not dominate it. This is still your thesis statement, your primary points, and your argument to develop that thesis. In other words, when I run these essays through the Dropbox, by the way, I did not see any plagiarism in this first essay, so good job there. When I run this essay through the Dropbox, it should have a percentage of stuff that came from outside sources. That number should be somewhere around 15 to 20%. That's ideal. It should not be more than 20%. If you give me an essay that is 65% outside sources, even if you've cited every source correctly, it is still not a research paper. It's a collection of quotations. I don't want a collection of quotations. I want your argument where you take an expert and you bring that expert in at some point and actually have that expert back you up. So, still your essay, still your thesis, still your main points, still your development, but you're using expert opinions from peer-reviewed journals to help make your point stronger. And it should be no more than 20%. 10% is kind of okay. 25 is really pushing your luck. But if I see something like 40, 45, 60, I'm going to say fail. There's no way that there should be that much. So, supplement your argument, not dominate it. I want this essay to be an analysis of your chosen story. I do not want a story summary. Do not give me... Pride and Prejudice opens up when Jane Austen says that famous opening quote, and now I can't, I'm spacing it, but it is a fact universally acknowledged that every man in possession of a fortune must be in want of a wife. Now, I don't think it's those exact words. Don't give me... The essay opens up with that. Then we meet the Bennet family. The Bennet family has 5 girls. They all have to marry because Longbourn, the estate that they live at, is actually an entailed estate, which means it's not going to be passed down to any of the girls. It's going to be passed down to the nearest male relative, which is a cousin of Mr. Bennet's by the name of Mr. Collins. Then Mr. Bingley and his 2 sisters move into Netherfield, which is an estate not far from Longbourn. And now all the girls are in a tizzy because it turns out that Mr. Bingley is single and rich. So one of the girls needs to marry him. In fact, every girl in the neighborhood is going to try to marry him. And then Bingley falls in love with Jane, who is the oldest of the Bennet girls. But Bingley also has this friend by the name of Darcy, and he turns out to be very, very arrogant. In fact, he's very full of pride. If you give me that essay, that will fail. You need to give me an analysis, not a story summary. So bear that in mind as you read this. Your paper should be foregrounded in logos, not ethos or pathos. Here's what ethos looks like. Well, I believe this because I'm an expert in this, and trust me because I am a moral person. Ethos, logos, and pathos, by the way, are all Aristotle's 3 modes of persuasion. You may have had some exposure to this in English 1101 or 1102. My 1101 and 1102 students all get exposure to Aristotle's ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos is ethics. Ethos is trust me, I'm a trustworthy person, or trust me, I'm an expert. You could very well be an expert in whatever you're writing about in your essay, but don't ground your entire argument on that. Pathos is emotion. We need to go to the Humane Society and adopt puppies so they don't get put to sleep. Oh, aren't these puppies cute? We need to adopt them. That is pathos. That is taking the emotion and trying to influence people by the use of emotion. Pathos can be really dangerous whenever you're using it for either anger or hatred. And if you watch these so-called news channels, you'll see that there's a lot of hatred and anger being espoused by the experts on those panel shows. So don't be the person that tries to make me angry or to make me excited or to make me afraid of something. Don't use pathos, don't use ethos, use logos. Logos is the use of logic. Here's how logos works. A very famous example. If Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, then it follows that Socrates is mortal. So you take premise A, premise B, you must come to premise C. That's what you want to shoot for in this essay, is using logos. Where you take a premise, you take another premise, you must come to this conclusion based upon those premises. Alright. In addition to quotes from the outside sources, I expect direct quotes from your chosen story to also be used as evidence to back up your points. Do not use pure speculation. One thing that drives me crazy is something like, well, maybe if Elizabeth wasn't so we're talking about Elizabeth Bennet and Pride and Prejudice. Maybe if Elizabeth Bennet wasn't so prejudiced against Darcy, she would have seen what a nice guy he was from the beginning, and she would have fallen in love with him sooner. I don't want to hear that. Don't give me speculation. If Elizabeth falls in love with Darcy right away, there is no Pride and Prejudice. There is no story. The story ends like that. The whole purpose of conflict is to make a story interesting. Nobody wants to read the story about love at first sight. Even Jane and Bingley in Pride and Prejudice kind of have a love at first sight thing going on. But then they break up. And it looks for all the world like Jane and Bingley are not going to marry. What are we going to do? You see, if Jane and Bingley don't have that breakup, that's a boring story. Nobody would read Pride and Prejudice today. That book would have been forgotten years ago. But because we got great conflict, we have a great story. Speculation will get you in trouble. Speculation will pull your grade down. Don't speculate. Well, maybe if this happened, then that would happen. No. And don't start lecturing your reader. You must not be prideful, because if you're prideful, you may lose out on a great woman like Elizabeth Bennet. You know what? I don't care what your opinion about that is. I will fall in love with a woman someday and marry her. And I don't need your advice for it, okay? So don't give any kind of a lecture either. So use your quotes to back up your evidence. Don't speculate and don't lecture. And then use specific details. Do not be vague. This is where direct quotes can help you. Don't use words like thing, stuff, some. Here's one that drives me crazy. Some say that in Pride and Prejudice, blah, blah, blah. To which I say, some what? Do you mean some scholars? Do you mean some college students? Or do you mean some astronauts or some firemen? I mean, really, some what? So don't say some say some scholars say. That is a simplified version of what I mean by specific details. Give me details throughout these essays. I expect that. So those are my 5 what I expects. Memorize that list. Learn that list. Apply that list to every sentence in every paragraph on every page of your essay. If you do that, you stand a really good chance of getting an A on this assignment. All right, so that's that. Now the rubric, I probably don't need to go through too much. I mean, we're approaching the 30-minute mark anyway. So I will go through the rubric pretty quickly. Quality of sources, I will take off 5 points for anything that did not come from Galileo or Gill. I feel that strongly about your research must be quality research. If I could go into Google and put in the title of your article and it comes up on somebody's blog, or it comes up on one of these buy a paper websites or something like that, that will cost you. That will be a penalty of 5 points right off the top. So don't go to Google. Don't even be tempted to go to Google. All right. I will give an automatic F to any paper that only uses sources from Google. I can usually tell these papers because instead of a works cited page, what I get is a collection of links. And I can click on any one of those links and I can go right to the page. I don't have to go through Galileo or Gill to do it. That would be an F right off the top. This is a research paper. I'm trying to teach you research skills. When you get into your major, especially nursing majors, I want to take a minute to say something to nursing majors here. Your teachers, when you get into your junior and senior level classes, whether you take those classes at Darton, or you go to Georgia Regents University, or Georgia Baptist Hospital, or wherever you go for your nursing program, your teachers don't want you quoting WebMD. Your teachers don't want you quoting, I don't know, the website for the Centers for Disease Control, if it's an article that anybody could access. Now, there may be some good CDC articles, don't get me wrong. I mean, the CDC is a great organization. But your teachers in nursing school are not going to want you to quote that. They want you to go to Galileo. They want you to find the American Medical Association's journal. The CDC, I believe, has its own journal that can only be accessed through Galileo. Use those sources when you're a nursing student. What am I teaching you how to do in this class? Use those resources. That will become even more important as you get into your job. So, if all you have is Google, you'll fail. I will also give an automatic F to any paper that is not an essay about your chosen play or novel. So, if you give me an essay about all the dangers of pride, and you almost never mention Pride and Prejudice, that's a failing essay. You need to foreground your discussion of pride in Pride and Prejudice and show how Darcy's pride caused a delay in his and Elizabeth's falling in love and almost cost him Elizabeth. And how Darcy was not very popular with Mrs. Bennet and all this stuff. That is what you talk about with pride, if you're going to talk about that in Pride and Prejudice. I'll give you an example that happened in my 1102 class, actually this semester. I had a lady write a paper about the yellow wallpaper. And she actually wrote a paper, and let's see, what was the subject that she wrote about? Anyway, if you've never read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, it's about a lady whose husband is a doctor and misdiagnoses what's wrong with her and gives her the wrong treatment, and it causes her to go insane. I think this student wrote a paper on insanity and what the causes of insanity are and how husbands can cause wives to go insane and all this stuff. Never mentioned the yellow wallpaper once. So I failed her essay. That will happen to you if you decide that you're going to write about something and focus on that something and never mention the chosen novel in your paper. So that's written on here. All right, so those are automatic Fs. Formatting, you can go into the MLA folder, find the creating an MLA template, and that way you can have the proper header, the proper font, the proper spacing, and so on and so forth. Thesis statement. 10 points of your paper. That's 10% of your paper grade will be the thesis statement. If your paper does not have a good, strong thesis statement, you do not have a point. Your thesis statement should be clear. I should know what your paper is about when I read it. Spoken with conviction. Do not use words like maybe or perhaps or I think. Just say what you have to say with conviction. Make it sound good. A thesis statement is a thesis statement. It is not a thesis question. This is not Jeopardy. These statements should not be in the form of a question. You want to answer things in the form of a question? Go play Jeopardy. It's a statement of what it is you're trying to say or what it is you're trying to explore. And it should usually appear at the end of the opening paragraph. That means you're going to have to lead up to it, like a little build-up in a song. So you're not going to open your essay with a thesis statement. All too often I'll ask a student, hey, where's your thesis statement? And they're like, it's right there. It's the very first sentence of the whole essay. No, it's supposed to be the last sentence of the opening paragraph of the essay. You're supposed to lead into it like you would lead into a song. Organization and structure. What this means is your essay should have a very clear beginning, middle, and end. So you should have all three of those things. You should open it up. I should feel like you're building up to the thesis statement. Bam, you give me the thesis statement, and then the rest of your essay talks about that. The middle should be well organized by main points. So, this point and this point. Now, this is a longer essay. So, just like in a 5-paragraph essay, each paragraph can have a main point. In this one, it may take 2 or 3 paragraphs to develop each main point. So, bear that in mind. So, each paragraph in this point is more like a subpoint than a main point. But then you develop each one of those. So you have good organization. Everything that belongs goes together. You're not bouncing back and forth between point 1 to point 3 to point 2 to point 3 to point 1 to point 2. You're not doing that. Everything is nice and organized. Those essay planning sheets that I not only have in a separate folder in D2L, but I also put those essay planning sheets in the research paper folder. Those are the same essay planning sheets that you could get in the essay planning sheet folder. Those will help you to organize your thoughts so you're not bouncing all over the place. And then a conclusion. I should not think at the end of this essay that you had more to say. Or, imagine, if you will, watching a movie and then stopping the movie with about 30 minutes to go. You're like, wait a minute, how does this end? I should not have that feeling when I read your essay. When I read your essay, I should have a feeling at the end that I've completed what it is you have to say. So that's the organization structure part of the grade. The main primary points, and the best way for me to illustrate this is to have a thesis that a certain baseball team may win the World Series because they have strong pitching, clutch hitting, and excellent fielding. So those are your 3 main points, the pitching, hitting, and fielding. The secondary or supporting details, those, if we go to the next page, develop the main points. So my main points are this team's going to win the World Series because they have strong pitching, clutch hitting, and excellent fielding. Now, the secondary supporting details, take a look at those. That is information that will support the main point. So how do I know this team has strong pitching? Well, their starters have the lowest ERA in the league. For those of you that don't follow baseball, trust me, a low ERA is good, a big ERA is bad. So they have the lowest ERA in the league. So that's strong pitching, right? The middle relief has a lot of powerful arms. Everybody that comes out of that bullpen can throw the ball through a brick wall. They throw that hard. So they scare other batters. And then Jim Fireball, the closer, has not blown a save all year. For those of you that don't follow baseball, usually the closer is the last pitcher that's brought in when the team has a lead to save that lead and to make sure that the other team doesn't score any more runs so that the baseball game can end. A blown save means that the pitcher actually gave up the lead. So you don't want to blow a save, you want to nail down a save. And this guy, Jim Fireball, has not blown a save. So those are 3 good reasons why strong pitching is something that this team has. And then I'm not going to go through it with the clutch hitting and the excellent fielding, but trust me, even if you're not a baseball fan, these are all good reasons to think that this team can win. Because if you put strong pitching, clutch hitting, and excellent fielding together, you should have a championship team. That's what these general managers in baseball look for when they draft out of the draft and when they sign free agents. You know, they're looking to put together the right combination of these 3 things. Your essay should be looking to put down the right combination as well. Quotations formatting. Are your quotations formatted correctly? There is a link right here to the Purdue OWL that should be active in your document in the folder. So that quotations formatting will be 10 points. They also have to be cited. You can't just throw a quote in there and not cite what page it came off of. So that is also important. So the format of the quotes is 10%. Another 10% is how do you use these quotes. Your paper, when I read your quotes should not look like something that you stuck in the paper because I require quotes. I would say you should average about a quote per paragraph. And your quote should not be at the end of the paragraph. After you say a quote, you need to explain what the importance of that quote is. So don't just stick a quote at the end of a paragraph and then move on to the next paragraph without telling me why that quote is there. So, how you use your quotations. Your quotations should be seamless. They should, your paper should flow so smoothly that when I read a quote, it looks like that quote belongs there. If your quote is just stuck in and there's no introduction like so-and-so says blah, 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 if you just have blah, blah, blah stuck in the middle of your page and I'm like, wait, what's that for? Wait, who said that? You know, something like that. Those are things I will count off for in the use of quotations. So make sure that you have seamless quotations. Your My Blank English book should have a section on that in the research paper. The Purdue OWL has good resources for telling you how to use quotes properly. So make sure that you use them well. Your works cited page. All right, let's go back to the annotated bibliography for a minute. Remember that your annotated bibliography is due this weekend. I have handouts on the annotated bibliography in the research paper folder. I also have a sample annotated bibliography that I put together using sources that I pulled when I was writing my master's thesis on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And you can use 1 or 2 of those sources, but don't make those your only sources. If you do your annotated bibliography correctly, your works cited page should write itself. Because what's going to happen when you get done is you're going to need to put that works cited page on the end. The works cited page should be on its own page. Don't end the essay on page 6 and start the works cited page on page 6. If your essay ends on page 6, your works cited page starts at the very tip top of page 7. So make sure that you do that correctly. If you do your annotated bibliography correctly, all you'll need to do to make a works cited page perfect is to take those words annotated bibliography at the top of your annotated bibliography, change those words to works cited, delete all of your annotations, and bada bing, you now have a works cited page that you can then copy and paste at the end of your essay. This 10 points should be 10 of the easiest points you get. Do your annotated bibliography correctly, you should not lose a single point on the works cited page. If you try to do it by hand, you will probably miss it. So here's something else I suggest. In that research paper folder, look for the handout using the cite tool and created a hanging indent. If you use that cite tool in Gill and Galileo, you should not miss anything. Now, there is a disclaimer in there that says that sometimes Gill or Galileo get it wrong. But if you do your annotated bibliography, I'll tell you where Gill and Galileo got it wrong. You can then make that correction. You can then use that annotated bibliography to make your works cited page. I'm telling you, if you use the tools that are available to you in Gill and Galileo, You may never use Google to do research again. I don't use Google to do research, and I'm writing a dissertation for my doctoral exam. I am not going to use Google at all. Everything that I'm using in my dissertation is coming either from books that I got out of the library from academic publishers, or they're coming from Galileo, because I can go into the Cite tool, copy it, paste it into the annotated bibliography, write my annotation, and then when the time comes, I'll be able to delete the annotation, and there's the works cited page. So, 10 points is the works cited page. If you don't have a works cited page, you've lost a whole letter grade because you got 0 on the works cited page. So make sure that that's done properly. And then finally, the surface errors. Take a look at that surface errors. I'm not going to go through your final research paper in July and mark every single little error because I won't have time for that. But I will mark your errors and say, you've done this repeatedly throughout the paper. Spelling errors, sentence structure, agreement errors, punctuation, look at all that. Look at that very last one. You errors. Notice how I've said never, ever, ever. Not just never, ever. I've said never, ever, ever. Use a second person pronoun such as you, your, or your in an academic paper. The only time that you are allowed to use you in an academic paper is if it's from a direct quote. So let's say that you're doing, I don't know, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And Utterson goes to dinner and says, Gee, Dr. Jekyll, you look great today. You look better than you've looked in months. If that is a word-for-word quote directly out of the novel, which it's not, but let's just use that as an example. But if that is a direct word-for-word quote that you got out of the novel, Utterson tells Jekyll, Gee, you look great today. This is the best you have looked in weeks. That's okay. You leave those yous in there because that's exactly as it appears on the page. But do not use you yourself. Only use it in a direct quote. I cannot stress that enough. In fact, I haven't even looked at these first papers yet, and I have a feeling that some of you are going to lose quite a few points because you actually violated that little cardinal rule. All right, so that's the research paper. I've taken nearly 45 minutes of your time, but I hope that you have found this 45 minutes following along in this and hearing what I have to say through my voice. I hope that you have found those 45 minutes to be beneficial to you. I also hope that you find all those resources I put in that research paper beneficial to you. The whole purpose of those resources is to help you become a better researcher and to get a higher grade on this research paper. Now, I can only do so much. I can only put the resources out there for you. Now it's up to you to work them and to get as good a grade as you can by writing as good a research paper as you can. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I know that 45 minutes is a long time to sit and listen to an instructor give you instructions on a paper. I know that you didn't have a chance to raise your hand and ask me questions, but you have the email in D2L, you have the email through Darton, and you also have the telephone during my office hours, or you can stop by my office. I'd love to see you. I'd love to meet some of you. So that's it. That's the research paper, and happy writing.